Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray of the EAFC video game and the Bundesliga. You're listening to the SFF Podcast World Cup Special, the home of World Cup 26 banter.
"100 days to go until Scotland return to the world stage after a 28-year absence. Of course, it wouldn't be Scotland at the World Cup without facing Brazil, which will be Game 3 on the 24th of June in Miami, and will be the fifth meeting between the two sides, a joint group stage record along with Argentina versus Nigeria. I'm John, and welcome to the latest World Cup edition of SFF Podcast, which is doubled up as a book special going out on World Book Day. And I'm delighted to be joined by fellow regular and bookworm Charlie Banks. How you doing, mate?
Good, mate. You?
Yeah, good. Really excited about this one. This will be something different than talking about our respective club teams.
If we can avoid that, that would be ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. We wouldn't go there. So yeah, glad to have you on. And well, you might bring the sunshine and Leith to this podcast. And tonight we're throwing in some samba beat as we look have a look at the impact of South America on football's greatest stage. We are joined by two men who have written a book on this subject called Mundiales, which is out next week. And I'm joined by their co-authors, Tim Vickery and Mark Biram. Welcome along, gents. How are you?
Thank you very much. Living large.
Yeah, the same. All good. Thanks for inviting us.
No, not a problem. We enjoy a book. I'm a fellow pitch author, so happy to help pitch out as well. So the first question: how did the project come about, and how do you two know each other that you were able to say, "Let's come together"?
Yeah, it's all his fault. It's all his fault. So Biram, stage is yours. Take it away.
Well, we first met back when I was doing my PhD fieldwork out in Brazil. We met and had a coffee, and then there was a gap while I was writing up the PhD. Then I came back to Brazil doing another project for my then university, Bristol, and we sat down and had a coffee again. And I was telling Tim about Viva Colombia, which he'd already written the foreword very kindly for me. So he said, "Is there another plan? What comes next?" So I started explaining that I was going to write a book about the World Cup from a South American perspective, and just off the cuff, I said, "It'd be a really good one to write. Would you be interested in?" And then Tim was like, "Yeah, I would actually." It was just kind of. Yeah, it kind of became a little bit out of left field, and I thought, wow, this is going to be great. So it came a little bit out of nowhere. Yeah. Is that more or less right, Tim?
Well, my recollection is getting my arm twisted a lot more than that, quite frankly, because I'd always thought I would never bother writing a book. Yeah. Too many words, my dear Wolfgang, too many words. Because as I think all of us have knowledge about this, writing can be a real joy when you've got something to say and you want to get it off your chest. When you haven't and you're slogging through the word count just to get to the end, it's a pain. So I always wondered with a book, what am I going to do? I can't. People would say you're going to write a book, and no way, it's just going to be painful. It's torture. But then he twisted me arm and said Pitch would be interested if I came in on it, and I thought, because I'd done a chapter on a book about World Cup upsets on 1950, and I really enjoyed doing that. Usually I'm a kind of 1,000 words, 2,500 max kind of guy, But that chapter was, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 or something, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the opportunity, and it started going around my head that there's something in this. This could be fun to write, and it's quite short and pithy because you've got so many World Cups to get through, so you can't get bogged down. The structure is just easy. It's just the structure is you don't have to. What are we going to do? No, you're going to do the next World Cup, and then you're going to do the one after that, and then you're going to do the one after that. But what I think is, it's one of those books where you can read the chapters in an isolated form, and they stand in an isolated form. or you can step back a little bit and read them, and there's an arc there, I think. And so, from never considering writing a book ever, within the course of a half-hour conversation with Mark, I was on the project, and I was looking at the year. We had all year to do it, I think.
Yeah.
I thought, well, that's not going to happen. Right.
No.
My freer time is at the start of the year. So what I did then was, right, come on. So I just, my inner Arturo Vidal, I just got in a blizzard of rage and just started sending them, writing, getting out of the way, just to kind of kickstart the project.
It definitely got me to pull my finger out when Tim was kind of reeling them out, kind of one every couple of days or so. I thought, oh my God, I really am going to have to step it up a little bit.
As they say in the land between us, we're the lads.
Indeed. Yeah. I think I did initially kind of undersell that a little bit, but yeah, kind of Tim initially was like, a book that's going to take ages, and I thought, well, if this was just kind of mini deadlines for journalistic pieces, it would be so easy. And then I think that kind of
that's it. That was the one that turned the little key. Yeah, all right, okay, all right, we can do this. Yeah, we can do this.
This is mission possible.
Yeah. Although you've got a longer deadline, other real life gets in the way, and then but by the time you get to say, I better do something about this. So I've done a co-author project, and it's, although me and my co-author with our project, it was mostly very good, and we were civil with everything that we were doing. There is times where you butt heads. So how have you guys overcome any differences of opinion that you may have had, if any?
That's a good question, isn't it? Yeah.
Should we give the Brian Clough answer?
Go on, let's do that.
Yeah, the Brian Clough answer, when he had a disagreement with a director. He tells me how he thinks it should be done. I tell him how I think it should be done. We sit down, we talk about it for 20 minutes, and then we decide that I was right. In fact,
that was a good Clough impression, Tim.
Thank you. It was really easy. I think on a project like this, it is vital. I think that one person probably couldn't do this, and I'll tell you why. You get that line right down the middle between Spanish South America and the other half, which is Brazil. And the two halves don't know each other. Maybe we're all prisoners of geography, and there are geographical and cultural and political things behind it. But they really don't. I mean, there's one book which I took as a little bit of a reference. It's by a Uruguayan author. It's called Golazo. It's a history of South American football. I think it's Andres Campomar. And it's a book with some virtues. But I read it and I thought, and maybe we'll come back to this during the course of the conversation, I thought, he doesn't know Brazil at all. He's Uruguayan, I think. He doesn't know Brazil at all. He knows nothing, really nothing. So there was an obvious split there. Mark written an excellent book on history of Colombian football, married an Ecuadorian as far as I can make out for research purposes, and
Indeed.
has a lot of knowledge there. So that was the easiest split, I think. That I would concentrate, although not exclusively, on Brazil, and he would concentrate, or not exclusively. And then it depended on the stories in the individual World Cup. I mean, there were some World Cups where there was an obvious case for having us both writing. Obvious case, 58, for example, where, Brazil win for the first time and Argentina suffer a defeat. It's so humiliating that it has massive consequences on Argentine football. And that just made total sense to split that one. Others, no, you could fit them all into a single narrative. And I don't think any of that gave us any problem whatsoever. It just seemed obvious to both of us where the split should be.
Yeah. I mean, I think they are the kind of two worlds that are quite difficult to reconcile with each other sometimes. I mean, there's a massive mutual respect, I think, but yeah, I think yeah, the Spanish-speaking world can be, yeah, can be found lacking a little bit in its knowledge of Brazil, I think, and yeah, probably vice versa. I mean, Brazil can be, being such a big country, can be so insular sometimes, I think, in some respects. So yeah, and as regards kind of any moments of tension, I think the only one I can remember was when I was writing the very first World Cup, 1924, the Olympics, and uh, and Tim quite rightly said, "Listen, Mister, this is not a PhD thesis. We need a rather pithier opening here." And I thought, what is he talking about? So I looked back at what I'd wrote, and I was like, yeah. So I kind of, yeah, I did do quite the rewrite on that one, and because that was the very first one that kind of kept me in check for the rest of the book. I didn't do that again, go off on a long waffling intro. So yeah.
Yeah, I had to wean him off academic writing, but I know
Yeah.
that was great, and that was because he he thought along the same lines. So so we were on the same page, and I honestly don't think that the book would be anything like as good had he written it all or had I written it all. I think the fact that you've got those, that different blend of experiences that makes the book, and I'm very proud of what we've done because again, I'm going to reference here the Andres Campomar book.
Hmm.
It starts, the very first, I think it's in the introduction, it starts with how this will be a bit hard for your Scottish audience. I apologise. I'll apologise. It starts with how those Anglo-Saxons, they can never dribble the ball out of defence. That's not them at all. And as I'm reading it, I'm thinking, well, that's a perfect description of what Bobby Moore does under pressure in the last minute of the 1966 World Cup final. And one of the things that you come up against, because of the nature of these societies and the importance of football to these societies, so much of the discourse is warped by nationalism and nationalist stereotypes of themselves.
Hmm. Hmm.
And again, this is the great advantage of having two British non-nationalistic people, because I ain't into the flag waving. He's not either. It's an accident of birth as far as we're concerned. And I think that gave us both a perspective to tell stories that in some cases are reluctantly told or not told, even in the countries. And I think that is part of the value of the book.
That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I think it's really difficult to resist these stereotypes, isn't it, sometimes? But I think that's something we kind of really set out to do and to try and break with them as much as possible, I guess, as well. It's kind of yeah, and I think yeah, so South America kind of mythologizes sometimes its own stereotypes, and that can kind of lead you down the wrong path sometimes. So yeah.
And here, the angle of class, I think, is very important as well, because a lot of these self-mythologizations, or whatever the word might be, are elite projections.
Yeah.
And Brazil is, that happy dancing, all happy doing the samba on the way to the beach. That's very, very useful, that kind of myth, if you're, in the words of the great Eric Hobsbawm, the economic champion, the world champion of economic inequality. And again, so you've got two British guys with a strong class angle who want to cut through that bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, in short, Tim, you're the Brian Clough, and Mark, you're the Sam Longson, or whoever it may be from the directors at Derby County. That's a great reference.
I was hoping to be Peter Taylor at the very
Peter
least.
Taylor, yeah. It's just because the director's reference, so I apologise. Yeah, you've actually answered one of my questions in terms of what eras, how you said what you covered the eras, so that's obviously been explained. But Tim, you moved to Brazil in 1994, the year that Brazil obviously won the World Cup in America. What attracted you to make the move?
I knew I got to know lots of Brazilians in London, and I just became curious. And I thought, well, why not? I was 29, which is I thought was a good age just to go and see what happens. Old enough to cope with the knocks, but young enough if it doesn't work, you come back and maybe start something else. So nothing was ever planned at all. There was no plan, and it's led me all the way to this particular podcast.
Yeah, it's gone up in the world, and now you're an SFF podcast. Doesn't get any better. And Mark, from yourself, you've written 2 previous books, Viva Colombia and Women's Club Football in Brazil. What was the inspiration behind those books, and how much has that experience helped you with this project?
Well, I mean, the women's football in Brazil and Colombia was the result of my PhD research. I had kind of a long interest in women's football and just kind of how, kind of the global growth of women's football versus kind of what's happening in South America, where football's kind of so intrinsically linked to national identity, and yet it's so often masculine national identity, So that's kind of, I got interested in how women fit into that picture and how the game was growing. So that was the PhD, and then as regards the Colombia book, I mean, I've spent quite a lot of time in Colombia. When I was an undergraduate at Manchester, we got to spend a year abroad, which was always like the main attraction of studying modern languages. So it was for me anyway. And then we got to the year abroad, and like everybody was going to Madrid and Barcelona, and I thought I could go a bit further than that, So yeah, I kind of applied for a British Council language assistant post, and yeah, Colombia kind of came up by chance. But I was kind of it was a great chance happening, really. And then from there on, kind of lived there. Well, the field work was kind of a few months, but I've been back there on so many occasions. It's kind of been a lifelong love affair. So I kind of started, I suppose, with the Colombia book. There was already so many books about that were really good on Argentina, on Brazil. And I just thought, yeah, that there's got to be space for one on Colombia. I mean, obviously, not quite as important historically as in Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil. But I mean, Tim and I have both agree on the idea that Colombia is perhaps the most likely outside of those 3 to get their hands on the World Cup one day. We both see kind of great potential there. We're yet to convince the rest of the world of that. I've said that a few times, and people are like, no. But anyway, we both see great potential in Colombia. So yeah,
Yeah, I'll save the banter for some of the chat when we go do the World Cup throwbacks. I did read the sample chapter on it, which is on Pidgeot's website just now, on Uruguay's 1928 Olympics in Amsterdam, which is a fascinating read. And although France are credited with creating the World Cup, Gilles Rimet and all that, but how much an influence on the World Cup came from this and possibly even the previous Olympics as well?
Tim's looking like he wants to take that one. He's looking at.
I'll just do it very, very quickly and then pass to you. It's
Okay.
It's a South American thing.
Yes.
Without the birth of the Copa America in 1916, the birth of the Copa America in 16 leads directly to the World Cup 14 years later. With you take that away, and the World Cup doesn't happen until the mid 50s.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
take it away. This is your stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess, I mean, the first dilemma when upon deciding to write the book was like, you've got those 4 stars on the Uruguay shirt, which it's just not a particularly well-known story to so many people, I guess. And like Tim said, it kind of starts with the Copa America, which predates the Euro by quite a period, really. And it's just kind of getting to the bottom of that story, I guess, and kind of piecing together how it all happens. I mean, I would absolutely agree. It's very much a South American story. I mean, as David Goldblatt points out in his foreword, he mentions the a lot of the big financial institutions, a lot of main institutions these days being kind of North American inventions, and obviously the massive cultural and economic influence of North America, and one story where it kind of that belongs to South America is the World Cup, really, isn't it? It's a kind of yeah. So
it's interesting you mentioned France, because I see this time as the time when the Americas, North and South, are really breaking through in different ways. I mean, think of 27. Charles Lindbergh crosses the Atlantic, and he becomes the most famous person in the history of humanity, and that really kickstarts American aviation, which was nothing at the time. 1927 is also when the Jazz Singer comes out. After that, the world is going to be listening to American accents. So, that you get that from North, and from the South, you get football. And while Europe is tearing itself apart on the Somme, South America is bringing just a few nations together. It's the South Cone, because the South Cone is the birth of it, really. Those nations together to play a Copa America, and which one's better, and that it really, and if you read the accounts, because the Copa America at the start is annual. Sometimes they can't do it because of Spanish flu or something like that, but at the start it's annual. So it brings about this dramatic rise in standards, amazing rise in standards, and it's that underpins Uruguay, who arrive as unknowns in 1924, wiping the floor with everyone. And football becomes by far the biggest draw in the Olympics. So football is outgrowing the Olympics then. And obviously with the Olympics, you can't have the professionals. So there's this great debate in 1924, who's better, the Uruguayans or the English professionals? And the contrast between the styles, that the English are like farm horses and the Uruguayans are like fine Arab thoroughbreds, and so this was 1924. I think a European audience really realizes this. Outside Uruguay and Argentina, a lot of people in South America don't realize this. But it's a really big part of history. And as I say, without South America, there is no World Cup until the mid-50s.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tim mentions in the book in one of the opening lines to the chapters. In the introduction, actually, the comment that you sometimes even hear in South America that the World Cup's just a Euros with Brazil and Argentina in it, or something of, and it's kind of such an ignorant remark, really, isn't it? I mean, it's one thing if you hear it in Europe, which we sometimes do, but it's another thing for actually South Americans occasionally come out with that kind of thing, and it kind of for that reason. To some degree, it feels like a bit of a revisionist history, really, to kind of go back and tell the real tale as it was. And I think there's just so many. I mean, coming from the academic background as well, which is so often has kind of disparaged the support, the study of popular culture, and kind of looked down on it. And you think, where else could you tell the tale of race and class in the same way as looking at football in South America? I mean, you look at the opening Copa Americas when there's one Copa America, I'm not sure which year off the top of my head, but when the Chileans complain about the
first one,
1916, yeah, the Chileans complain about the Uruguayans fielding African players, because obviously Uruguay,
two of them are black, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of so far ahead of its time. It kind of beats Brazil, really, to kind of incorporate in
again because of social democracy.
The first state on the continent as well. Yeah,
and the great thing about this isn't just history, because I mean Uruguay, they're not doing very well at the moment. They're a bit of a shambles at the moment, but this is a country that goes to the World Cup thinking of winning it. And as recently as 2010 in South Africa, they reached the semi-finals. That's because of the history. In the famous line, other countries have their history, Uruguay has its football. So it isn't just ancient history. It isn't just, dusty stuff. This stuff affects today. I love that link between. I remember being in the Centenario Stadium that Uruguay built for that first World Cup in 1930. I remember being in there in the museum, and they had a outing, a group of special needs kids, and they showed them a video of 24, 28, and 30, and these kids were just transfixed because they could see their streets. Oh yeah. That's 18th of July. That's the main drag. They could recognise those streets, and they could see the stadium because they're in the stadium, and the connection between then and now was really clear in their minds, and I think that's a fabulous thing. I think if you step back from the chapter by chapter, and every chapter, I think, tells stories, but I see the overall arc as absolutely dominated by the figure of Pelé in 3 acts. First, you're waiting for Pelé. Because of the democratic nature of football, the elites try very hard to keep those poor people, keep those black people out. Less successfully in Uruguay because of social democracy. So Uruguay is drawing on black players from this first Copa America and from the first Olympic wins and World Cup wins. But the early years are a kind of waiting for Pelé. There are 1 or 2 kind of John the Baptist type figures from Uruguay and also from Brazil. But that's the first period. And then you get the Pelé years, those 12 World Cups, where Brazil win 3 and 4 and are then associated with everything that so many Scottish fans associate them with. They're the spiritual guardians of the beautiful game and all the rest of it. And that yellow shirt that they only just started wearing when Pelé comes on the scene, it becomes then immortalised. And the World Cup becomes the big TV event. It becomes the event, and there's no guarantee that it was going to do that. Pelé is the key figure in that happening. And then you get the post-Pelé years, where Mexico 70 is kind of the one where we're all judging every World Cup against Mexico 70. And it's kind of really fitting that the end is Messi winning the World Cup, kind of rising to the challenge of Pelé, while Pelé is spending his last conscious days on Earth watching that tournament. So that, I think, is the overall arc of the whole thing, which I think is a great story in itself. But then you burrow into every chapter, and I'm sure there'll be stories that you don't know, narratives that you don't know, goals that you do remember and want to remember again. So that I think is the value of the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just reminded me, it's a point I think you've made many times over the years, but the idea of just playing against history on the pitch, when you were talking about Uruguay, because in theory, I mean, some of the other South American nations, like say Colombia or Peru, they got maybe 10, 12 times the population, probably a little bit more. But there's this kind of psychological barrier. It's like, we're playing against Uruguay, they've got all this history, and it's like, in some sense, you think there should be some way of kind of blanking that from your mind and it not mattering, but it kind of does matter, doesn't it, in football? It's kind of, it's fascinating how and like Tim said, it kind of gives Uruguay this belief that maybe it can happen again, and kind of inculcating that belief into the players of Colombia, who probably have most of the recent World Cups just as much talent, is actually difficult. It's kind of difficult to, you can't replace that kind of historical prestige sometimes. And we see that in club football as well sometimes, I don't know, particularly with, say, Real Madrid or something, just in the Champions League performance. And it's just all that historical prestige, isn't it, that kind of comes through. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously as we look at South America, more recently with, Brazil and Argentina have sort of dominated the conversation. Obviously Argentina winning the last World Cup. How much in the book can readers expect to read of other nations? So obviously Uruguay won the first one, but will there be stories for people potentially reading the book of of every World Cup of just how big a part South America had to play in all of them.
Well, if the Copa America in 16 is a vital moment for world football. For South American football, there's a similar moment in 1996 where they start the marathon World Cup qualification format, where the 10 nations are playing each other home and away. Now, for the first time, that gave South American nations the kind of calendar that European countries just take for granted. Regular competitive games, guaranteed income. The lesser teams didn't have that before. You know, if you're Ecuador, how are you going to get glamorous friendlies? On Ecuador, I think before they qualified for the World Cup in 2002, I don't think they'd ever played a serious match in Europe, ever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you're Ecuador. I remember Colombia coming to Wembley for the first time. It was 88 or something. How great that was. You know, but that was yes. Yeah. So since that point, it's really striking how many of the countries have had their best ever World Cups, and even Uruguay coming back when they thought that they probably would never come back. But after this 1996 thing, you get Ecuador qualifying for World Cups now. They'd never done that before. Best World Cup ever in the history of Paraguay. Best World Cup ever in the history of Colombia. Best World Cup ever in the history of Chile, with the exception of 62 that they hosted. You have seen a rising of standards. If it's been hard for the teams at the top to beat the Europeans, it's been easier for the teams at the bottom to become competitive. So that I think has been a strong dynamic of the last few years. So certainly, moving towards the end of the book, there are more nations becoming important to the narrative.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of another area where kind of Tim's common sense prevailed, I think, because it's kind of we were talking about, you know, exactly the question you've asked, really. You know, where can we get the other nations into the narrative? And you know, at certain points in history, there isn't a story to tell about Ecuador, or you know, I mean, there's nothing much to say of Bolivia. You know, very very fleeting appearance in '94. They were at the first one in '30 in Uruguay, the first. So. Yeah, I mean, sometimes the story just isn't there, but I think wherever it is, we've tried to incorporate it as much as we can, really. And as Tim says, it starts really with that marathon qualification format, which is, you know, I mean, I think at most of the recent World Cups, I always find in South America, they bring the same article out. They kind of rehash the same article, which says we've got more teams through to the second round than any other continent, you know, as a percentage, because of course, you know, if five or six of them turn up, almost 5 or 6 of them qualify, maybe 4 or 5, and you know, that's a greater percentage than any other continent. And up until Argentina winning the last one, that kind of performance getting through the group phase hasn't been matched by the latter stages. I think that's been probably the movement in the opposite direction, hasn't it, Tim? It's kind of been more difficult to actually, you know, once you get to those, once you get past the phony war stage and you know, quarterfinals and onwards, that's been kind of where they've really hit the ropes, I guess, the bigger nations.
Yeah, as a book I'm looking forward to getting myself. I've been chatting to John today. I'm a big reader this year anyway. I'm on 14 books as we come into March, so looking forward to getting your one on the list.
I'm impressed.
I've done 9 by the end of January, so it's been good. So I'm looking forward to adding your book to the list. So you've got a launch event in London next week. So are you looking forward to that? And sort of tell us a little bit more about how that came together. What was the idea for doing a launch event for your book?
I've absolutely no idea. Unfortunately, Mark won't be there. And this all came at the last month. We were told last week there's going to be no launch event, and then suddenly there was. So
Yes.
no, it's just a chance to get people together to have a chat in a very similar way that we're having now. And the difference being, because it's not online, people will be there. They'll be actually able to buy the book.
And if people aren't at the event, where can they buy your book?
I guess on the pitch website, all good bookshops, hopefully, and yeah, and that rather large retailer who have trouble paying sufficient tax, as far as I can understand. Yeah, I think that would probably cover it.
Yeah, I think people can put two and two together there. Before we move on to sort of looking at the World Cups, I've got a question from a listener on Twitter or X, if you, however you prefer, called Top Trevor, and he asks, how much research went into the book? Did you guys rely on muscle memory, I guess, for the more recent ones, or did you have to revisit some World Cups and specific games, players, etc., in more detail?
Watch lots of games, stuff that I'd never seen before, and footage. And one that just made me really happy. I found it. Brazil played Hungary in the Battle of Bern in '54 and lost and didn't take it very well. And there was one point where a very controversial penalty was given against Brazil by the English referee, Arthur Ellis. Now, if you're of my age, you will remember Arthur Ellis from It's a Knockout. He was Uncle Arthur alongside the since disgraced Stuart Hall. He was Uncle Arthur with his dipstick. And Brazil were just enraged by this penalty and invaded the field. And that they made an official protest afterwards, accusing Uncle Arthur of blowing his whistle in favour of godless communism. This is the level of lunacy that we're dealing with. But yeah. I found good quality film that shows the handball. It shows it because it's been a blur in other footage. But I saw, and you can see the player is the centre back Pinheiro. You can see he goes and he puts inadvertently puts his hand on the ball, and you can see the referee mimicking the gesture as he points to the spot. So went through a lot of games, and also I think one thing that we're both proud of this is the number of original language sources that we've gone to as well. So that gives it, and it's so there are stories here that have never appeared before in the English language.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, also I've been kind of watched so many old clips as well. It's amazing how much stuff you can find online these days. You kind of end up going down rabbit holes and thinking, oh, I'll watch this as well, and then watch another interview about it, and kind of, yeah, you do kind of discover these little things that kind of you're thinking that certain moments that kind of don't suit the national mythology or the kind of the national narratives, and yeah, it wasn't necessarily a conspiracy in favor of godless communism in this case. So yeah, all really interesting stuff. Kind of looking into these things.
Good stuff. Say we're both really we're all really excited about Kinnem and listen. I think they should maybe give it a look for something different, and certainly will be educational if we've got there isn't to go by. But let's delve into World Cup yesteryear. We'll be taking it back from the first World Cups of our lifetimes now. Mine's is Italian 90, but I can't miss out on a South American football podcast, talk about 86 and bring up Maradona, etc. But even before we get to Maradona, Mark, Colombia should have been the hosts for this tournament, and it was taken away from them. So what happened that Colombia had to eventually pull out or have it taken from them and given back to Mexico?
It's a good question. I think as is often the case with Colombia, there was kind of a lot going on at that particular period, and yeah, I mean, can you shed any light on that one, Tim? I think essentially
pressure from Mexico.
Avalanche
not wanting it, It was a stretch. I dread to think what would have happened in a World Cup in Colombia in '86.
Well, exactly.
It's a different country these days. It's a different country. But personally, I don't think it would have been ready in '86.
No. I've spoken to Colombians who've said that they kind of it would have been really. Yeah, I think the security was probably an issue at that time, and yeah, just the infrastructure kind of wasn't really there, and in some sense. So yeah, I don't know if there was kind of a sense of relief or who was kind of behind it. But I mean, the Colombian Federation has a habit of making quite ambitious bids. I mean, they bid to host the Women's World Cup. As well, which I mean, Brazil have actually got the Women's World Cup, haven't they now, Tim? That's going to be kind of quite an interesting moment.
Fabulous way to end the book, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's true. It's true. But yeah, I mean, the Colombian federation, or I mean, there's a few stories about the different the Colombian federation, the Colombian league, the different machinations between them, but they have a long history of kind of being a tad over ambitious, I guess. And I mean, right from the early days, Colombian football starts as kind of deeply marketized, and it has the era where they're bringing all the best stars over from Argentina. So it's always had this kind of wild ambition, and I think probably
isn't that the story of '94?
Yes.
Wild ambition meets country in complete collapse.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, it's the story of what might have been, I guess.
They got a very nice stadium out of it. The stadium in Barranquilla that was built for that World Cup. It's a great stadium, fabulous stadium, and it's been their base ever since. It's where they like to take their home matches. It's really sweltering hot, and they play them like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
That's where I was as an impressionable young undergraduate on the Caribbean coast there. Yeah, it's a place I know very well. Watching Junior de Barranquilla. Yeah, fantastic club.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of there would be a lot of lobster red tartan army if Scotland were ever to play it in Colombia.
You're going to Miami in the afternoon. You're going to melt, man. You're going to melt. That's even before Brazil take the field.
Yeah, God help us there. But in Mexico, Scotland struggled with the heat then, and they came up against Uruguay, and it's well known, documented back home that the president of SFA calls Uruguay the scum of the earth, or scum of world football, I think it was they used. What's Tim? Obviously, you're old enough to remember that particular game. I mean, some people think that Uruguay were so bad, were so brutal that they would support England against Uruguay in the 2014 World Cup.
Well, remember, they'd just taken an absolute pummeling from Michael Laudrup, the boys of genius.
The Danish dynamite.
So dealing with humiliation, and I think part of it was they couldn't catch Laudrup to kick him. So they were clearly going to kick someone. Although I've often felt that by the standards of the day, the first minute sending off against Scotland was a little bit harsh.
Yeah, probably a booking now.
Yeah, well, between us, we've all seen much, much worse from Graham Souness, who was a fabulous player. Don't get me wrong, a fabulous player, but we've seen much, much worse than him. So I've often wondered if that was kind of premeditated.
Well, Scotland made the mistake of not playing Souness in that game, which I think
would have
probably been ideal.
He was out on his feet, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He said himself that he just couldn't move, the altitude and so on. It was a shame. It was a shame because he was a terrific player, and one of the points that I often make, because 82 is a discussion here in Brazil. There are people who attack it. Dunga, for example, they're specialists in losing 82, and one of the arguments that's used against 82 is they didn't beat anyone. They beat the Soviet Union with a dodgy ref. Soviet Union could have had 2 penalties. Beat New Zealand, and in between, they beat Scotland. Who? And I have to tell them, that Scottish team was really, really good. Really good,
team,
And it was the best players in English football at that time were Scottish. So I think the 82 side would have stood a much better chance of getting past the 10 men of Uruguay than 86. It still makes me laugh, actually. Ian St. John getting so angry after the game. I imagine it inspires different emotions in yourself.
You can I can only imagine, but yeah, it was at the end of the day, Scotland had 89 minutes to beat 10 men and couldn't do it. Steve Nicol had the chance. That was the one Ian St John was really annoyed at. But you know, Diego Maradona was the magician of that tournament. I mean, it's never a one-man team because someone's got to give Maradona the ball, and he's got to give the ball to someone else, etc. But he almost carried Argentina to that glory with the goals he scored, and of course he's remembered for the handball, but he scores an even better goal against England, and definitely one of the best players that we'll ever have seen.
Without a shadow, without a shadow. I mean, I was perhaps quite fortunate in terms of my remembrances of Maradona, in that my first World Cup really was 90. You know, I just turned 10 then, so I wasn't watching in 86, and thus never kind of felt any of the kind of visceral emotion that some people probably did. So I kind of
Can I tell you how I was watching it? I was at college at the time,
please
and
do,
I was watching it next to a great mate of mine from Wales who had blagged an Argentina shirt. So he was wearing an Argentina shirt.
Fantastic.
But yeah, but I have to tell you, I couldn't, even at that time, I was 21, I'd never been outside England. I could feel no ill will to him whatsoever. Because the rough stuff that he was taking, and it was, you were seeing it, and you knew it was going on off the screen as well. I had a chat once with Terry Fenwick, who was trying to mark him, and slapped the elbow in his face. And he told me it was impossible. It was absolutely impossible. I don't think there has ever been a player who has been as cheated against as Maradona. A piece of info that I got from a fellow who used to be physical preparation specialist from Brazil. From the mid-70s to the mid-90s, the average distance run by a football player doubled during the game. So you get a massive physical evolution of the game without any corresponding extra protection from the referee that comes going into USA 94 based on how few goals have been scored in Italia 90. And Maradona used to take the field not knowing if he was going to end up in hospital. I mean, the idea that so many of my compatriots will brand him as a cheat, he was cheated against.
Yeah.
So even then, even 86, watching him do it, and I'm thinking, well, I consider myself a kind of stand-up kind of guy. But if I'm getting elbows in my face and I got a chance to put one in with me, I'm taking it.
Yeah,
I'm taking it.
There's only so much you can take before you're going to give something back, isn't there? In some form. I mean, we were talking about watching clips kind of when we were researching it, and I saw some of the fouls by the Koreans. Are just like, and there's so many games where they it's just outrageous. It's just outrageous, and and it's kind of a cliche, but you think, what were the referees doing? Was there kind of no was there no kind of common sense to kind of protect the player who was taking so many fouls? It just, I mean, I suppose you had to do a lot more to get sent off back then as well, because you just think, yeah,
unless you're a Uruguayan in the first minute against Scotland.
Well, yeah. Exactly.
Let's say classy response from an Englishman living in Brazil. Take note, Peter Shilton. That's how you have dignity. So if we move on to Italia 90, and we'll start again quite local. I'll just do these a couple of. I'm not going to go through every single South American team because we'll be on all night. But Colombia were at their first World Cup, as it turned out, and I think you had the crazy hairstyle, the flamboyance, the footwork, and that's just Rene Higuita. But we are, of course, talking about Carlos Valderrama. They made some impression. I remember this was my first World Cup, and I remember there was this fan. I think it was just like some kind of falcon bird thing, and it was
El Collet, yes, who got his travels. He used to hang down off the. He can't do that no more because they've put a stop to that. So he's still fluttering away. His travels are actually sponsored by a brewery, so I've called him the Birdman of alcohol.
Oh, that's sensational. But yeah, they made an impression. Obviously, Valderrama scored a great goal in their first game, and they got that draw against West Germany through Freddie Rincon. But then Rene Higuita thinks he's Valderrama, and Roger Miller reminds him, no, you're not.
Yeah, man, I always think that was kind of partly down to the suicide, the hospital ball that he was given back by the defender. I mean, it's just kind of, I mean, obviously he could still, I don't know, boot it into touch, but that's just not the nature of the guy. But he just kind of gets the ball under such pressure, doesn't he, Tim?
And
In
the
that.
TV commentary is just fantastic. It's
Yeah,
unbelievable because the ball's played
yeah.
back to him, and the Colombian TV commentator, and here it's back to Renegade, who's such a good sweeper. Keep, oh no, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's comedy gold, and yeah, the English language commentary is quite amusing as well because it's kind of so kind of self-righteous, like, oh, well, what did you expect to happen if you kept doing that? You know, just kind of, it's just like he's thrown the chances away now. What an idiot, you know.
But see, what's forgotten about him
Yeah,
is that short passing style was dependent on him taking responsibility. No, because it was him who enabled the lines of the team to be close together, which enabled the short passing game that was so hypnotically brilliant. And I often wonder, he was unjustly in jail for 94. And had he been there in 94, because he was
yeah,
so great at spreading confidence through the team. You know, he wasn't overawed by
definitely.
anything. So
Yeah.
it's I often wonder what might have been.
Yeah, yeah, because it was such a difficult moment psychologically, wasn't it? And to have had someone with that confidence, um, yeah, and just the positions he would take up on the park would have they wouldn't have had to defended quite as deeply at certain moments, and yeah, I mean it was incredible, really, that they lost to that US team, because they were such a talented team. They were such a talented team. Yeah, I mean the Romania game was a really tough one. I guess looking back, you can kind of understand the Romania result a little bit, but the US one will always remain a mystery to me. Really, just kind of I suppose it shows just how much pressure can do in football sometimes. Because in terms of the abilities of the two teams, it should have been an easy game for Colombia, really. But yeah, pressure can tell sometimes.
And against the hosts as well wouldn't have been easy. But that was one of Pele's not so great predictions. Was tipping Colombia to win that World Cup. I mean, to be fair, they blitzed Argentina in qualifying, so you could understand the logic behind that. But obviously, it didn't happen. But yeah, Brazil and Argentina was one of the standout games in Italian 98, and it's a game where, let's be honest, two men won that effectively for Argentina. Goycochea had a world-ending goal. This is where he really broke onto the scene, having been the number 2 goalkeeper. And then Maradona with his one big moment to that janky run, and then Claudio the Canesian runs the goalkeeper, scores, and then thinks, yes, 10 years' time I'll be at Dundee.
I was wondering if that was going to get a mention. Yeah. Yeah.
We have to like Scottish football in it somehow.
Yeah.
In 2014, the Argentina fans all came to Brazil. They sung about that goal during the entire tournament. You know, so even though Argentina didn't win that tournament, there is an aspect of Argentine football that loves, and I suppose aspects of South American football, they love that kind of victory. Backs to the wall. I would argue it wasn't Goycochea and Maradona. It was Maradona and the woodwork. Because I think Brazil hit the woodwork 3 times.
Yeah.
That's right. But I think Argentina, I mean, whilst they had the flair in '86, they almost like had a different tactic of playing for penalties in Italian 19. It almost worked because it did get them to the final, but one game too far at the final, and it was my first World Cup final, and I still think it's the worst World Cup final ever. I know there's other contenders such as '94 and 2010, but this was a very poor game, and it was justice that West Germany won it for me.
Yeah, I think it was probably justice, but it was warped justice, because I would question their penalty, and Argentina had a clear penalty at the other end. But, you know, right team won, really. I mean, they were...
Just about, I think. Just about. Yeah.
See, Mark likes all this scrapping stuff much more than I do.
Well, you as a Spurs fan,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, pretensions to
myself,
glory.
myself as an Oldham fan, what can we say? What can we say to?
Right, you're on with an Aberdeen and a Hibs fan, so this is going well. So yeah, see, Argentina obviously lost that final, but then Brazil almost, it wasn't a flamboyant Brazil in USA 94, but I don't, people make that as if they were a defensive team. They were far from it, not with guys like Romario and Bebeto up front, but, they were a wee bit more pragmatic. How much lessons do you think they'd learn from, especially 82 and probably other tournaments as well?
Well, they were lost for a while. In 90 they went with a sweeper system, and so 94 it was back to a back four, and they really felt the pressure. 24 years without winning a World Cup, and they go to the USA. What's the numbers this year? 24 years without winning a World Cup, and they go to the USA. So and the pressure was on them, and this is something which I think is fascinating. Think about this World Cup. It was a side that was built to play in conditions of extreme heat. You're right, they weren't a defensive side. It was a possession of the ball team. But the front two, Romario and Bebeto, they didn't get a lot of help from the midfield. And the midfield didn't score a goal. I think maybe one penalty. That's all you got from the midfield. So it was solid to play in the conditions of extreme heat. And that was the Brazil without the wingers. The fullbacks were the wingers then. And what fascinates me about this World Cup now is it's a Brazil very, very much with the wingers. And Ancelotti, what he wants to do is go with a front four. Whether they'll be able to do that in the conditions of extreme heat, I don't know. But certainly, but in USA '94, Brazil had a side that was tailor made for the conditions.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think the other thing that might go in their favor this time is just having the expectation very slightly lower. I mean, I think Brazilians still expect to win the World Cup probably, but I mean, I remember in 2002, I think the pre-tournament favourites were probably France and Argentina. France as holders, Argentina seemed to be very good in qualifying, and Brazil kind of scraped through pretty disappointingly, and then suddenly it all came together, didn't it? It was and it was a good enough team to win the World Cup, worthy winners in the end, but kind of they didn't arrive among the two favourites.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, also cover 2002. Maybe I'll go into quickly to France 98. Obviously, you had the opening game, Brazil versus Scotland. So this is where Tom Boyd became a Brazilian national hero. It was Scotland's biggest game ever. I mean, that's as close as we were going to get to a World Cup final, was playing that opening game against the world champions in Saint Denis. It was it was a terrific occasion. France 98, there was some standout names like Salas at Chile, Chilavert, although he's a bit controversial these days, with Paraguay almost scoring with the free kick. Batistuta was on fire, and of course the main man, Ronaldo. Is
there a question there?
No, just if you want to expand on the impact that these guys were having in the tournament.
How old were you in France '98, Mark? I imagine it was an important one for you.
I was 18. 18, the same as young Michael Owen.
Yeah. I was 17, and that's the last World Cup that we were at. So this year's the first one I can legally drink at a World Cup. For support of Scotland, that is.
This is kind of the moment where I made my name, really, because Brazil, by this point, the Nike thing was in full flow. Any tournament up to and including USA '94, if you're a British fan, you didn't know Brazil before the World Cup, and you got to know them during the World Cup. By 1998, that's changed because Nike have got involved. So all the, that airport lounge advert that people will remember, and that kind of gave me a living, to be honest, because I was here. And interest in, and media was expanding, and interest in Brazil and the national team was skyrocketing. But they were so unbelievably overhyped, and I kind of made my name saying, if you want to lose your money, then bet on them, because it ain't going to happen. And see, I remember a broadcast of the final, BBC World Service, and they're saying to me before the game, they're saying, "Oh, France don't really deserve to be here, do they? And I'm saying, France are going to win this one easily." You know, they're looking at me. So it was kind of where I made my name. It is tough winning in Europe, you know, and the only South American side that have done it is Brazil in '58. I think probably for that reason that they might be considered they don't have the benefit of TV, but I think they can probably be considered the greatest of all time. But I didn't think on every match against European opposition, Brazil really struggled. And the side who first gave us an indication of this were Scotland in the opening match.
It's amazing you mentioned that Nike airport scene, because Scotland took such inspiration. We used it in a music video, but Gordon Jury scoring at Prestwick Airport doesn't quite have the same ring as Rio de Janeiro, but it was still funny at the time, to be fair. But yeah, we did give Brazil a good game that opening day. Also, the Collins penalty, etc. It's just unfortunate. There's not much Tom Boyd can do. I mean, there's not much Tom Boyd can do. You know, he's got to be there. It's hit Jim Leighton and then hit him. There's not much that can be done. But yeah, Brazil, they were really good against Morocco and Chile. But yeah, Denmark gave them a very good game. I thought they were lucky to get past the Dutch. And it doesn't help that Ronaldo has the seizure has been before the game and is effectively forced to play. I mean, is there much more to it than meets the eye?
Well, he didn't have a seizure and he wasn't forced to play. Apart from that, everything you said was correct. You know, right. There's no seizure. There's no convulsion, because that would have shown up on the tests, I'm led to understand. And it's he who says, because he
apologies for the ignorance in that.
No worries. It's he who goes to the stadium and says, "I'm fine, pick me." And I think this has overshadowed how they were struggling, because he was by no means the worst player for Brazil on the field that day. By no means, you know. I was in no doubt that France were going to do it, because I knew that they could mark Rivaldo. And I think, you know, Karen Bird did him, and I think when he got a yellow, he got subbed, and something. Bogosian came on, and if you squeeze Rivaldo, that then you've got Ronaldo's supply line. They weren't a very good side, you know. I mean, the midfield, they got themselves in a mess. They were playing Leonardo on the right of midfield. He's entirely left-footed, and that didn't work. Dunga was way past, and they knew it. They'd known it since the Copa America of '95. They knew that Dunga was way past, but they got themselves in a state where, and again, this is, I think, a virtue of the book. The seeds of Brazil's defeat were planted in the Olympics 2 years earlier, because the Olympic campaign was where they were so confident that team was going to go through, and that was going to be the World Cup team. And they only won the bronze medal, and they never really convinced. And it was then that, you know what, we need Dunga. We need Dunga. So they got themselves in a situation where they kind of couldn't play without Dunga and couldn't play with him. And I think one of the virtues of this book is we're looking at the stories of these teams and the way they're formed, sometimes before the World Cup. And did you know, for example, that going into Mexico 70, there was quite a big lobby in Brazil, including the fellow who was coaching 62, to say Pelé can't play. Obviously, as soon as the World Cup starts, never said it, but it's there in print. You know, no, he's gone, he's past his best. We can't carry him. He's gone, you know. So it's in all of the chapters, there are stories behind the teams, adding to what you saw during the course of the World Cup.
Yeah, definitely. And I felt with that World Cup, I felt quite strongly France were going to win it by the final as well. I thought the big moment for France was probably the quarter when it goes to penalties with Italy. I mean, obviously that can go either way, but other than that, they just looked a stronger team, didn't they? At that particular moment, I kind of I didn't think it was an even final. Even it didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, in the next World Cup, I mean, France were obviously the victim of big nations going out pretty early. Like, they were one, Portugal another. Argentina, although they were in a tough group with England and Sweden, it was still a group you expected Argentina to go through. Some people said Argentina were favourites.
It is the worst World Cup that I can remember, and the reason, and we're going to have to get used to this, I think, with the overcluttered calendar, was that pretty much everyone who had gone through the European season was just on their knees. On their knees. Remember that World Cup started early. It started in end of May to avoid the rainy season in Asia. And the Champions League had been extended. There were 2 group phases in the Champions League. So everyone who had gone through the European season were just, didn't have it.
I think it's the only way you could explain South Korea and Turkey in the
exactly.
semi-final at that particular moment, without wishing to say it too loud, being in Turkey at the moment. But,
so the differential that Brazil had was the physical preparation, and their physical preparation was it's probably the best interview I've ever done. Just after that World Cup, I did one with a fellow called Paulo Paixão, who was the physical preparation specialist of Brazil for that tournament. And he explained to me, we knew France, the 2 sides that we really feared, Argentina, but we knew, Bielsa ball, they wouldn't be fit enough to do it. And the one that we really feared was France. And France, just a few days before the World Cup, they put their prestige as champions on the line, playing a friendly against South Korea. And they lost Zidane with an injury. And Brazil just looked at that and think, what on earth are you doing, you idiots? They played like Malaysia a week before and then eased off. And what Paulo Paixão was explaining to me, that because of the calendar of Brazilian football, we know how to keep players fit much, much better than the Europeans do. Like Ronaldo, for example, Inter Milan couldn't get him fit. Brazil got him fit. So even like that win, because that win is often 3 R's, the 3 R's. I think there's a lot of appliance of science to that team as well. But I worry.
Which there always was from the early days as well, no? With the 58
yes.
and 62 and all that, which kind of flies in the face, doesn't it, of the kind of the more romantic kind of idealist narratives of what Brazilian football is. But I think a lot of Brazilians are kind of aware of that kind of stuff, aren't they? In a way that the European audience perhaps isn't always. It's
one of the reasons that they'll blame their failure in '66 was on the fact they didn't. The physical preparation specialist come from a martial arts background, not a football background. Now, if you think what physical preparation was in English football then, couple of laps round the track, lads, round the pitch, lads, couple of laps, and then we're off playing golf or in the snooker hall, and
I didn't think it was going to be that rigorous, to be honest. I thought it was going to involve a beer or 2, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we've covered off nicely up to Korea and Japan. Charlie, do you want to take it from Germany 06 to present day?
Yeah, so my first World Cup that I can remember vividly was 2006. I was born end of 97, so I've never seen Scotland at a World Cup. So this is a first, hopefully not the one and only in my lifetime, but it's been 28 years, so it might well be. So the World Cup 2006 for me was a tournament of last and first. So it was the last World Cup for Ronaldo, but it was also the first one for Lionel Messi. So obviously two of the best players ever, the real Ronaldo and, in my opinion, the best player of my lifetime. So what do you guys remember about sort of the 2 of those guys at that World Cup? Obviously, Ronaldo had a great tournament. Messi was just coming through, so there was a lot of expectation on him at the time. So what do you guys remember about that tournament for those teams in particular?
I think Ronaldo had paid the price for all of those knee injuries and a lifestyle where he wanted to enjoy himself, and the level of fitness. That team was again that was another Brazil team that was ludicrously overhyped. They were like showbiz stars, and I didn't think they had the slightest chance. And over here, everyone thought they were just going to stroll to the World Cup, but it was star driven, and the stars were given too much laxity. I'd seen them without Ronaldo, but I'd seen them playing Argentina a year before the World Cup, and they were 3-0 down before half time. They just didn't have anyone in midfield to mark Riquelme. So, they come up against Zidane a year later, and Zidane just did them again. With Messi, I'd seen him start of 2005 play. He was 17. I'd seen him play for under-20s for Argentina, and I couldn't believe it. He played one friendly for Barcelona at the time, and I thought this is incredible, extraordinary talent. Who the coach Peckerman, it was a terrific team. I often wonder if he's a bit of a bottler, though. I mean, he was Colombia's coach in that game against England in 2018, where I think he let himself down a little bit, and he didn't bring Messi on when they're ahead against Germany and they're trying to protect a lead. He was a bit unlucky with injuries. The goalkeeper got injured, and he took off Crespo, his centre forward, and he didn't think he could do without a centre forward, so he didn't bring on Messi. I think Messi just would have enabled them to hold on to the ball so much better. Because I think maybe they were running out of steam. I mean, after the 6-0 win over Serbia, a Serbia side who I think conceded like 1 or 2 goals in qualification, and Argentina just passed holes in them.
Just blitzed them, yeah.
Yeah, and they were probably on the downward, but I still think they could easily have won that World Cup. And they were so much better than the Germans, but went out to them on penalties.
Yeah, I think very similar to the other game I mentioned, the France-Italy penalties in '98. It was probably a crucial game in that World Cup, wasn't it? Because I think if Argentina had have edged Germany out in that quarter, it could so easily have been Argentina's World Cup. And I think man for man, they probably had a better squad than Germany at that point. I think, yeah, I mean, as Tim said, he wouldn't bring Messi off the bench, and he kind of went a little bit defensive. But Germany at that point, I mean, they'd made the previous World Cup final in Korea and Japan in 2002, but they were at a kind of a rebuilding moment. It wasn't necessarily the strongest Germany. Klinsmann was in charge as a very kind of experimental manager without much experience, and I think if Argentina would have perhaps gone for the jugular a bit more, they perhaps could have done it. I remember that was probably the game I was most disappointed with in that World Cup. I mean, Germany played a good game; they kind of ground it out, but I thought, yeah, probably Argentina had a bit more talent and probably should have done it in that game.
Yeah, no, it was a great World Cup, first one to watch anyway, and then we moved to South Africa 2010, and a lot of the South American teams that maybe you wouldn't have expected to go deep, like Paraguay and Chile, they get quite far, and Uruguay as well. And obviously Diego Forlan gets player of the tournament, but also there's the controversy of Luis Suarez handling the ball on the line against Ghana. So what do you guys remember about that World Cup? Was it more the story of Diego Forlan had a great tournament? I think he got Golden Boot that tournament. Or was it more of a Luis Suarez let himself down and let Uruguay down in that game?
I think all the anti-Suarez thing in this case is bollocks. I really do. They were up against the continent. I was doing that game for a BBC Africa service, and blimey, the backing that Ghana got in the game. And this is right at the end, and it comes from a free kick, and it was never a free kick. It really was, but no one ever talks about this. No one ever talks about this unless you're in Uruguay. That was a hometown decision that Ghana got there with the free kick that came in, and then especially from my compatriots, all that moral hypocrisy and so on.
Yeah.
And Jack Charlton did this against Portugal in '66, and he never got sent off, never got anything. No one ever said a word. And Suarez did what he did, and he paid the penalty for it, which meant that he was out the semi-final. But had the referee done his job and not given a free kick, it was absolutely non-existent, then Uruguay could have got through, and Suarez could have played the semi-final.
Yeah, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a Uruguayan who would refer to it as a controversy, so much as just like maybe a no-brainer at that point. I guess. I mean, the rules that sanctioned it obviously went off, and yeah, I mean, I suppose about that World Cup. I mean, Uruguay go the deepest of the South American teams, don't they? And I suppose it's getting to that moment where you're kind of wondering, will South America manage it again anytime soon? It's kind of we're kind of getting to that kind of European supremacy moment already, and then it goes on for another couple of World Cups, obviously.
But the fascinating thing is you get both sides of the coin, because you get this: can South America win it? But on the other hand, Uruguay qualified through the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah.
they were the fifth
Yeah,
side in South America
fifth in South America, fourth
and
in the
fourth in
world.
the world.
Yeah,
So that's
and it
telling you
wasn't.
something about the strength in depth.
That's right, and it wasn't that implausible, was it? It was always kind of, yeah, they've got the strikers to do it. They've got a
Yeah.
solid defense. It didn't seem that outrageous that they managed it. Yeah,
Asamoah's year about bottled it as well. No, if he does his job, they're not talking about Suarez as much.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, we then go to the World Cup in 2014, one in South America and Brazil, which would have been incredible to be, you know, to be in South America for that World Cup. And I think for the what things I can remember from that World Cup are, James Rodriguez, what a tournament he had, and then obviously Messi burst onto the scene properly at that World Cup, I would say, and Argentina get to the final, and there's that question: do you think Argentina would have won it if Messi had been fit? Because I can't remember if he played the final or if he came off, but
No, he did. No, he played. The one that they lost, who I think maybe this year people will understand his importance a bit more, was Di Maria. And after he got injured, they didn't score another goal in the competition. Di Maria is a fantastic player. I don't think we've ever seen anything like him. A player who's that good and that decisive in big games, who really doesn't seem to have any ego, and he's quite happy just to do what is needed. And it's quite a big. And he's having a great time in Argentina at the moment. It's quite a big push to get him in the World Cup. And unfortunately, I don't think he's going to do it. But that was a shame, I think, in a way, because Argentina in qualification, they would go three up front. It was Messi, Aguero, Higuain, and Di Maria in the midfield three. And the idea was it's going to be tit for tat, and we're going to do you. And when they got to the World Cup, and this was clear from the selection for the very first game, end of the season, the coach, Sabella, looked and said, we ain't fit enough to do it. We're not fit enough to do it. So it became attritional. It became very attritional. So a side that during qualification had played one way, when you get to the tournament, it was a side that they weren't always easy to watch. They kind of ground out results. As I say, after they lost Di Maria, they never scored another goal. So this is the worry about having the World Cup when we have it, and this I think is one of the reasons why Qatar was just so good. I don't think we're going to get anything like the final that we had in Qatar in the States later on this year.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the one before Qatar and Russia 2018, Brazil and Uruguay get the furthest out of the nations that qualified, but only as far as the quarterfinals. However, interesting fact that the top scoring player alongside Edinson Cavani from South America was Yerry Mina of Colombia, a centre defender, which I found out earlier when I was having a little look at. Like both of them got 3 goals, but that must be quite an anomaly that a South American defender is one of the top scorers in the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what could we say? It was crazy. I remember the equaliser against England late on was the one that sticks most in the mind for obvious reasons. But yeah, I mean, he just had an incredible tournament, didn't he? Kind of a classic example of a player who's kind of made the name from the World Cup, and yeah. I mean, going back
tragedy of that one for Colombia is James was only fit for one game.
Yes,
which was, and it's one of the performances of the tournament. They just destroyed Poland.
Yeah,
but you take him out, and they weren't the same side.
Player,
and even now, and he's playing now in his 11th different country or something, and he doesn't do anything for clubs anywhere. But for Colombia, he's still as important as he's ever been.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember a player who was always like that when I was younger was Georgie Hagi. He was for Romania. He was tremendous for the national team, and then you'd see him in the odd club game in Europe. And I mean, I suppose there was the foreigner rule for Barcelona at the time, but he just didn't seem the same player in club football to me. I'm sure he did some good things here and there, but he kind of really shone for the national team in an interesting way. And I suppose to be it's like what you were just saying about Di Maria. It's kind of fitting into the collective context. What role you have in the team, if you're the main man. Who the supporting cast are, all this kind of thing. I mean, when you were talking about Di Maria, it made me think back to Seba Veron as well, who is kind of someone who spent a lot of time in I can remember the conversation about both at Manchester United and people saying, "Oh, they're not good players," and it was like, I remember Ferguson, losing it a little bit with a journalist. He's like, "For pity's sake," and I mean, obviously they were both tremendous players, but they just didn't seem to fit into the collective context or whatever they were trying to do at that particular moment. There's always reasons for these things. But James for Colombia is always the main man, and kind of they always seems to shine for them.
Yeah, no, that World Cup in 2014 especially, just not even the goals he scored, but the different types of goals he scored. Like the volley he scored, I can't remember who it was against, but
Against
Uruguay.
Uruguay. That's one of the best goals I've ever seen at World Cup. Just the technique he had, and looking at obviously Qatar 22, Tim, as you said, the best World Cup I can remember being alive. Like it was nice having games at like 1 p.m. where I could take my lunch at work and watch a game like that. That was amazing. And obviously it then ended in, I would argue, the greatest final in World Cup history. Yeah. The greatest story in World Cup history of Messi finally getting the big one. There was always that debate, who's better, Messi or Ronaldo? And to me, that just ends the debate. Messi's won the World Cup, Ronaldo's obviously won the Euros. But from a South America perspective, what do you guys remember about that World Cup? Is it more the story of Messi, or is there more to it than meets the eye for that World Cup?
Well, I think the Scaloni with Argentina story is just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Remember, this fella has never coached a senior team in his life. And Argentina give him the job after 2018 because they just had to pay off a long-term contract on Sampaoli they've sacked. And he happens to be there. He was on the coaching staff in Russia as an observer of Argentina's opponents. So he's just cheap and he's there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember Maradona at the time saying, well, he's a nice lad, Scaloni, but he's not fit to direct traffic. And Argentina, who hadn't won a title since 1993, have now won 2 Copa Americas and a World Cup in the middle. It's like the great Spain side, That's what he's done. And so that's a fabulous story. What makes it even more fabulous is how badly it started off. Because Scaloni is originally enchanted with France, who he's been watching in the World Cup. So he takes over saying, what France do, rapid transitions. They win the ball, within 3 or 4 seconds, they're in position to shoot a goal. That's the style that we need. That's what we're going to do. And you think of this and you're thinking, well, that's not a Messi idea, is it? Messi doesn't really fit into this idea. But that's what he starts doing. And his first tournament, the Copa America 2019, their first game against Colombia, they are just awful. They're absolutely dreadful. But for the first time ever, Messi is, but at this stage, he's falling out with Barcelona. And Messi has identified the rest of his career, he's identified the Argentine national team as his priority. If he's going to bother doing it, he's going to do it all in. So Messi becomes Scaloni's helper. Where there was always a feeling that Messi, with his very introverted nature, he didn't talk to the other players and he intimidated them. Suddenly you couldn't shut him up. And he becomes the leader. And he's surrounded by his fan club who worship him. And Scaloni cleverly lets this happen and feeds this. So from disaster in Russia 2018 and things getting worse afterwards, they begin to find a groove. And it's that groove that has taken them all the way to 2 Copa Americas with the World Cup in the middle and winning this last bout of South American World Cup qualifiers by a street. So, it's can they do it this year? It's never been done before. No one has ever successfully defended their title in a different continent. No one's ever done it. And it's the same old at the back. It's the same defensive unit, the one that collapsed time and time again in Qatar. And you're thinking, surely they're going to pay a price. And Otamendi still plays when he's suspended for the first game, so he can't play the opener. So I hope, because Argentina defending their title, it can take on, because I think there's a tragedy already in there. That tragedy of having something to lose, of having a title that, if the World Cup gets scrapped and is never, ever played again, Argentina would be probably quite happy. We're perpetual champions. We can't be beaten, But the times when they've defended, there's been an aspect of tragedy and drama around the whole thing. And I wonder what's going to happen in this last chapter of the Messi story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Argentines almost enjoy that kind of that struggle as well, don't they? The kind of things being a tad complicated and kind of I mean, I'm sure they wouldn't choose to have a creaking defense, but some of the best moments are kind of backs against the wall. I mean, I always remember my first World Cup '90 when they just kept scraping through, and Maradona was like a pantomime villain. But by that time,
do you think they lost to Saudi Arabia on purpose then in Qatar? Do you think that was all part of the master plan?
It may well have been. It may well have been. I mean, no, that was a bizarre game, wasn't it? Absolutely bizarre. Yeah.
Well, there was a spell during the World Cups where the holders didn't do very well, like France getting out in the first round, and Italy and Spain and Germany. France broke that curse a few years ago. I don't see Argentina re-entering that phase with the group. They've got Algeria, Austria, and Jordan. I think it's one that you would expect Argentina to come through. In terms of the rest of the South American teams, I'll just go through this quickly before we come on to obviously Brazil. So Paraguay, I've got America, Australia, and one of Turkey, Romania, Slovakia, Kosovo. Ecuador, I've got Germany, Curacao, and Ivory Coast. Uruguay, I've got Spain, which will be interesting, Cape Verde, and Saudi Arabia. Bolivia, if they come through the playoff, get Suriname and Iraq. We'll get France, Senegal, Norway. Colombia will have Portugal, Uzbekistan, and one of New Caledonia, Jamaica, or Congo Democratic Republic. Out of those sides, what teams do you think have the best chances of progression to the knockout stages, or do you think all seven? Well, providing Bolivia qualify, that all seven qualify.
I think most of them should be in a strong position to qualify.
Not Bolivia. Not Bolivia.
Yeah.
They've got a tough.
Whether they get there is a moot point, isn't it? But other than that, I think, I mean, with the enlarged format now, I think more so than ever, we're going to see South American teams, 90% of them qualifying from the group stage at least. I can't see any of the groups that look particularly tricky for the South American side.
No, me neither. Ecuador worry me a little bit. I mean, they're a very interesting side. And that the defensive unit is just unreal. It's unreal. But they don't score too many. They're still dependent on Enner Valencia for goals.
Wow.
And he really is at a veteran stage now. I mean, and the first game, remember in Qatar, the crunch game where they end up being eliminated. And I thought they played really well in Qatar. But the crunch game was Senegal, the African opponents. Now their first game is African opponents. It's Ivory Coast. And Moses Caicedo suspended. That's a big loss. It's a big loss. So I do worry a little bit about them, although scoring against them really, really isn't easy. But you just want, especially in this crunch game, in the absence of Moses Caicedo, where the goal's going to come from.
Yeah. It's incredible that out of 10 nations in South America, 6 were allowed to go straight through and 1 have the playoff. I know that's caused problems. Rio Gattuso in particular had a bit of a dig at Brazil because they lost 5 games and Italy only lost 2, etc. But Chile and Peru in particular must have been really poor in this qualifying section if they didn't even make it in that top 7.
Yeah, I mean, Peru got through to Russia 2018 and nearly got through, and probably were a bit unlucky to lose the playoff on penalties against Australia for 2022. But I think that was fabulous work by the coach. by Gareca, the fellow who looked like a rock roadie, because there's not a lot there, and they haven't been producing. They really haven't been producing. It's sad, I think, Peruvian football. And Chile have been dreadful since the golden generation. You see this a lot with South American sides. You see a generation comes through and they can't be replaced. And Chile had that fabulous generation that won them the Copa Americas in 15 and 16 and won them lots of friends in the World Cups of 10 and 14. But they've been utterly unable to replace that generation. And that has an interesting aspect, I think, because going back nearly 20 years, Chile is quite often very pro-business and so on. The clubs in Chile became businesses. And there was this big hype about, now Chilean football. It's been crap, absolute crap. And the record of the Chilean sides in South American continental competitions is disastrous. And they're not producing. And why is this? Oh, yeah, well, the business model, they've cut down on youth development. They've had real problems. They managed to do the undoable. You cannot lose at home to Bolivia in World Cup qualification. They did, despite being gifted their only goal. The only goal that Chile managed, the Bolivia goalkeeper is going to kick the ball, and he suddenly does a serious knee injury. So he just collapses when he's about to kick the ball. And Chile centre forward there, Vargas, he could have done the sporting thing, but he didn't. And that was the only goal they scored at home to Bolivia. If you're going to lose at home to Bolivia, you really don't deserve to be getting anywhere near a World Cup.
No, it's pretty woeful.
Yeah,
pretty woeful.
Obviously, from Scottish perspective, we're looking more at Brazil because the big game, and there was mixed reaction when Scotland got Brazil in this World Cup, because it was a case of wait 20 years to get to the World Cup and we'll get two of the same teams. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, it'll be the fifth time that we've met, which will be a joint record. What are the Brazilians thinking about coming up against Scotland? I know that they won't fear Scotland, but how much respect is going to be put towards Scotland, and what about meeting up with the Tartan Army as well?
They love the qualification story, the Denmark game. But really, I think possibly in contrast to Argentina, there's a lack of respect, a lack of knowledge, I think, about the tradition of Scottish football. It's quite strong in Argentina because, Scotland were key imperial partners, and a lot of Scots went out to the empire, formal and informal. And you found Scots, was it Alexander Watson Hutton in Argentina, who's like the father of the Argentine game. And that's where that division in the early days of football between the English charge style and this strange Scottish innovation of passing to someone in the same colour shirt, that really took on in Argentina. And they've kind of passed away now, but you would still meet people who referred to that school of football as La Scorsese, the Scottish style.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think there's more respect in Argentina and so on than there is in Brazil, where, as I was saying, the 82 side, there's no real recognition of how good that Scotland team was that they overcame. The Scotland team who perhaps made a little bit of a mess of their win against New Zealand and then made a big mess of the draw against the Soviet Union. But they had some terrific players, some really, really good players. I'm not sure that the current Scottish side matches 82 in terms of individual talent. Maybe Steve Clarke's got them very, very organised. But my memory of the day of the draw is, as soon as it happened, the phone is just ringing. And I'll answer it saying, look, you got to wait for the most important part, because at that point we didn't know when the game was going to be. If memory serves it right, it could have been in one of the air-conditioned stadiums, or it could have been in Miami in the afternoon heat. You drew the short straw. It's Miami in the afternoon heat.
Yeah, it's going to be extremely difficult for the Scots. But in terms of Brazil's expectations overall, I mean, it's been 24 years, they say, back in America, like it was it was a 24-year gap as well. And Carlo Ancelotti's obviously in charge. You know, he's won a lot over in Europe. What is the expectations? But how much of that has been dampened by Rodrigo's ACL injury that he suffered this week?
Probably, it's a very cruel thing to say, but it probably solves a selection dilemma for Ancelotti. Because and he wants to go for this front four, and this I think is going to be a key thing for Brazil's campaign. And we ain't going to be able to find this one out until the heat of the World Cup. They play a warm-up game, I think, against Egypt a few days before. Can you play four in midfield, four up front, and two in central midfield when one of them is Casemiro, who's 34? You know, in conditions of extreme heat. The most interesting thing, I'm fascinated by this. Ancelotti has said a few times now, I don't want anyone going to the World Cup thinking about winning Player of the Year award, Ballon d'Or. Don't want that. Don't want any of that. No,
he's playing that. That's kind of quite countercultural as well, isn't it?
Yes. But that's a message to Vinny. That's saying to Vinny, the only way that this is going to work is if you work back.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
And I think the front four, there was a dilemma there because I think, and many things can change, injuries and end of season and so on. But in his mind, I think three of the front four were fixed. And that's Estevão, Rafinha, Vini. There was a battle for the fourth between Rodrigo and Mateus Cunha. And obviously he's got a personal relationship with Rodrigo. But I think he kind of wanted Mateus Cunha. So he now has Mateus Cunha.
There's one less problems to think about.
Yeah, and Rodrigo, I feel very sorry for him because he's always been the coming man, but he's never quite done it. And the last World Cup will hold bad memories. He missed his penalty in the shootout against Croatia. So he would have seen this World Cup. He's got another one, but he would have seen this World Cup as a moment to become. And I'm quite surprised he hasn't left Real Madrid in the last two windows. Go somewhere where you can be the main man. So I think it's a cruel thing to say. It's a massive blow for him, but I think it's a bigger blow for him than it is for Brazil.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we're delighted that we've got Brazil, I would say. Not because we think we've got any chance of winning the game, but it's just like that's the team you want to play. Like, for me, it was out of that point, it was Brazil or Argentina. You want the biggest teams. And, hopefully we're still within a chance when we come up against Brazil to get through. We might not be, but depending on how the Haiti game goes. But, it's just amazing to be playing Brazil. So before we wrap up, guys, we've got some quick fire listener questions from the guys who do the podcast with myself and John. So the first question comes from Josh. This is a two-parter, and he asks, the best three players from Scotland and Brazil in the 1998 game and the best three players fitness assumed for this year's game.
Scotland and Brazil.
Mm-hmm. Who do you think are back in 1998, who were the best three players, and who do you think will be the best three players for this year as well?
Do we include Tommy Boyd, Tim?
Yeah, I can't. I don't know. I just remember how good John Collins was, but I can't really remember the Scotland game, the Scotland team. For Brazil, it was a massive game for Cafu. It's a huge game for him because he went into that World Cup with everyone thinking he's not up to it. And he had a storming World Cup, and he had a good game, didn't he? I think I would have to go with Cafu. Ronaldo, obviously, when it wasn't his game. He eased his way into the tournament. One thing that Brazil know about is how you win tournaments, and you grow with the tournament. So how can you not include Ronaldo in that three? For the third one, I'm stuck between Tafarel in goal, who played 3 World Cups and hardly made a mistake. Aldair in the centre back, who was class, and Roberto Carlos at left back. And because I've gone for one full back already, I think I'm going to go for Aldair.
Tafarel also made a wonderful save from Mo Johnson in that Italian 90 game. It was one of the best saves I've ever seen.
At the end of the game.
Yeah.
It was an unbelievable save. Unbelievable save. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and who do you think, looking at ahead to this year's game for Brazil, are the three players that the Scotland should be worried about? Obviously, Rodrigo was one of them that I was worried about, but unfortunately, he's not going to be there now. So, who would you say are the three that we should be? Oh no, we're up against these guys. If you can whittle it down to three, that's
yeah. I mean, the first thing that Ancelotti did when he came back was recall Casemiro, and that's given him functionality. That's helped the others play. I wonder what physical condition Bruno Guimaraes is going to be in. That thigh injury that's kept him out might do him a favour. Might mean he's fresher come the end of the season, because he's been the biggest beneficiary, I think, of Casemiro coming back. It's sorted out the role. It's left him freer to attack the space. But really, I think you've got to go for those three who are fixed in up front. I think Estevan, if he continues, he's an unbelievable talent. Rafinha, who has developed unexpectedly, I think, playing inside into one of the best in the world, and Vinny, who, all right, if the boss won't let him want to be the best player in the world and win the Ballon d'Or, he's still really, really going to want to make his mark. Who's going to be right back for Scotland?
Oh, that is the question.
It's either likely if Hickey's fit, then he'll be first choice. But then after that, it might be Nathan Patterson could be back in the squad. He's had a few games for Everton, but then after that, it's not one that we want to talk about. Hopefully not Anthony Ralston, because he's not even getting off the Celtic bench.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's the worry coming up against that front three or front four, as it might be. Is I think the defence need to have the game of their life to even get a sniff. So yeah, we're looking forward to it, but very worried about getting absolutely.
Obviously, Stevie Clarke is going to think about packing the midfield, isn't he? Yeah. Obviously, it's just the obvious thing to do. If they're going to come with a 4-2-4 like that, you're going to play five across midfield, and you're going to strangle service to the front men, and run down the clock as much as possible, and hope you don't melt.
Yeah, and maybe nick a 1-0 or something. That would be superb. Okay, next question comes from Jamie. This is more of a light-hearted one. How did Peter Shilton manage to lose an aerial duel in his own box with a 5'5" South American?
Oh dear. Now then.
Yeah,
I don't want to slag Peter Shilton off, but maybe that wasn't the best aspects of his game.
Yeah,
and he was a big bloke, and he was a fantastic shot stopper, and he saved England in other World Cup games, but maybe wasn't quite the best. The kind of reaching up aspect maybe wasn't quite the best.
Yeah, but was it Steve Hodge wasn't playing?
Yeah, Steve. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve Hodge became a very rich man after that.
He did.
He did. Second last question comes from Dave, another contributor. This one you might need to think about. So he's asked for a five-a-side team. However, you've got to pick a player from Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, Costa Rica, and Ecuador.
Well, we're not having Costa Rica.
No, they're not. They're not in South America.
No.
Another country.
What? Well, insert another country.
So what was it?
So we've got Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, Ecuador, and will we go Colombia?
Colombia, yeah.
And I'll tear a strip off Dave in the chat later on.
Yeah. So do we have Higuita in goal?
Perfect.
Would that be
Yeah. No opposition there.
Yeah, let's run with that. So five-a-side.
Do we have to do Messi and Ronaldo? I think we do, don't we? Surely.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's got to be a strong case there, hasn't there?
You only need one defender on five-a-side, and even that defender probably will go up.
Yeah. Can I make the case for Edison Mendes of Ecuador, central midfielder?
That surprised me. Yeah.
I think he was a fabulous. And he played in Holland for a while.
Yeah.
He played the World Cups 2006 and 2010. I think he was a fabulous little player.
Yeah, it's quite a good left field choice. I was thinking Moises Caicedo wouldn't be too far away.
All right. Okay. All right.
But yeah, I mean Edison Mendes very good.
No, let's go with Caicedo because he's probably better in the tackle. And then a defender from Uruguay, Diego Godin.
Godin seems
Done
reasonable. In
So Higuita, Godin, Caicedo, Messi, Ronaldo. Done.
I think that team wins the five-a-side World Cup every time. That's a superb team. And the last question is one that I ask anytime we've got a guest on. Gratitude's something that I'm trying to get better at. So the question is, what 3 things in life are you both grateful for?
Welfare state, more than anything else. More than anything else is being a child of the welfare state.
Yeah.
And my mum just got out of hospital today, so it's something that obviously I dwell on, quite a lot. But I think this has quite a lot to do with the profile that I've been able to achieve in Brazilian media.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, I'm trying to sell a book. You've got to blow your own trumpet to a certain extent. It's never really been done by a foreigner before, what I've done on Brazilian TV for 16 years now. And if I was just a kind of rich English, then it wouldn't have happened. It really wouldn't, But no, I'm a representative of council housing. I have so much to owe to council housing. And I think the destruction of council housing has been the biggest act of idiocy, the biggest act of self-harm that our country has done. And any other act of self-harm, be it Brexit or whatever, can be linked to the destruction of council housing. So, yeah, and free education. So that I think that makes me more interesting to a Brazilian audience. That I'm like a walking. It works. All right, we got rid of it after 79, but it works. You can have this too. You can have, So,
I mean, I think I was kind of much more at the fag end of it, I guess, kind of. But I kind of feel the same. I feel that kind of my life experience has been greatly enriched by the British welfare state, by education, the opportunities I've had, which I think it takes kind of living in places like Ecuador and Colombia to see the value of it, to think, wow, how lucky I was, just kind of, and I do think it does affect your interactions with people from other countries a lot, for them to kind of realize that you're a product of something like that. And it's definitely been my top 3. Yeah, well, maybe we've named 2 of the 3 there. Kind of education and the welfare state.
So my 3 are welfare state. Number 2 is mostly, not exclusively, but mostly Black American music. That's the soundtrack, and the English stuff, which is inspired by it. That connection between Black American music and the British working class, I think is unreal. Unreal, and our attempts to try and do it, which often aren't perfect, but there's something different, and that they take it off in a new direction. And the Beatles for me are. It's a lesson in how to live your life, the Beatles. That combination of humility and arrogance, the humility to, and not only on the Stones done it, all the Stones, how many Black American acts, or even Bob Marley, the Stones helped to break, So the reverence for Black American music. Yeah. On the other hand, from especially from the Beatles, the arrogance to say, well, you know what? We use this as a base. We're going to do something even better. We're going to express ourselves and do something. And I think that combination of humility and arrogance is just priceless. And that for me is the way to live your life. And the third is football. Because football was the first thing I was kind of aware of and conscious of. I didn't make it abroad until I was 23. My old man never made it abroad. He got to 84 without ever getting further than a weekend in Dublin. But football internationalizes you. It just makes you a global citizen. And those three things together, kind of black American music and its influences, football and the welfare state. That's me. There's almost nothing else left, you know.
Yeah, very similar for myself. Yeah, football in general and Oldham Athletic in particular. Um, and yeah, I mean, music's got to be in there as well. I think for me, I mean, I really love a lot of Latin American music, which again, particularly in Argentina, kind of draws on the Anglo tradition as well, quite a lot. But yeah, very similar, very similar. I mean, I guess probably speaks to the kind of similar backgrounds that we're from, really. Just kind of
that's why the book worked, you know, because we're pretty much on the same page.
Yeah, I mean, those two were always in competition for me in my youth, football and music. You know, and music had its moments, football had its moments, and
but there was nothing else, was there? There's football, music, and clothes if you could afford them. You know, there's nothing else.
Yeah. I think you might be a tad trendier than me, Tim. I don't.
Not trend, it's style, please. Nothing to do with trends.
Sorry, there's a category error there. But yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, I'll pass you back to John to get us wrapped up.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks again, guys, for coming on, and all the best with the book Mundiales, which is out on Monday, the 9th of March. And yeah, good luck to most of the South American teams in the World Cup this year, apart from when Brazil play Scotland, of course. We hope maybe we'll get one of you back on to preview the Brazil-Scotland game or whatever. We'll maybe make a date of that. But thanks, Mark and Tim, and thanks again, Charlie, for assisting me. And thank you to everyone for listening to this latest World Cup edition of Scottish Football Forums podcast. But for now, happy football.